All right, just building up from the interview that we just had, JMPD spokesperson Mr. Wayne Minnaar making some allegations against the union. Some were saying that they were basically acting unilaterally in calling for members to strike because members have reported for duty. It is a little bit bizarre, but I do understand that our producers have tried to get SAMWU officials to come to the studio to speak to us. Perhaps they're still on leave. We will continue to make those attempts to establish communication with them. I think it is something that needs to come to the fore, because if that is the case, it is the most bizarre story that I've heard, that they wouldn't want to come and negotiate with the employer, that they wouldn't want to get the mandate from the workers. Those allegations are quite profound, so I think we need to really follow that up. Something else that we need to follow up that affects you and I directly as well. In 2015, the government said that South Africa was facing its worst drought since 1982, with more than 2.7 million households facing water shortages across the country. Large parts of South Africa were declared as disaster areas last year. This remains an immense concern, especially for farmers, as the drought has dire effects on their cattle and their crops. Well, joining us in our Pretoria studios this morning is Omri van Zyl. He's the CEO of AgriSA, to talk about these issues and more. But a very good morning to you, Omri. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ayanda.
Perhaps before we get into the issues, you could give us a little bit of background and update as to what AgriSA does and where it fits into the greater scheme of things.
Ayanda, we basically represent most of the agricultural sector in South Africa. We've got 24 commodities that's part of us. That includes maize, red meat, etc. And then on the other hand, we represent 27,000 commercial farmers, about 5 million developing farmers and small farmers, and then we have 9 provincial offices. So we cover basically the whole spectrum of agriculture in South Africa.
We are facing a heat wave coming up this week. I believe Thursday we'll have record highs in terms of temperatures. That will do very little for your cause to try and make sure that you mitigate the effects of the drought. Did you see this coming? Were farmers perhaps warning government or other officials that there's a potential drought looming, or did it catch you off guard?
Look, yes, no. We knew this was coming. I mean, we're monitoring the weather patterns. This is typically part of the El Nino occurrence. So where we have severe droughts in southern Africa, we have severe flooding in Europe, for example. So we saw this coming. The extent of the drought was not clear to us. So we've established the drought management task team with various industry players, the government and the disaster fund, to look at the occurrence of this drought and the impact this has on the economy, on the consumers, and on the industry as a whole. So we're currently working towards establishing exactly what this means for South Africa, to the extent that we would have food inflation, to what extent we need to import various products, including maize, and basically the economic effect this will have on not just our farmers, but also on the South Africans as a whole.
Are the interventions bearing fruit?
Well, to give you an example, in 1992, we had to generate about 3 billion rands just to mitigate at that stage what we were facing. In real terms today, that's currently going to escalate to about between, let's say, 10 and 20 billion rands, depending on the outcomes of our study. So we will have to, as South Africans, take hands and make sure that we tackle this problem head on. It's not just a South African problem, it's a regional problem. We have the same problem in Namibia, in Botswana, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, and in Mozambique. So it's actually a bit of a regional catastrophe that we are facing at the moment.
You call it a regional catastrophe. I want to know your personal opinion. Are you optimistic that we can get out of this in the best possible shape, or should we rather be a little bit pessimistic?
No, we should never be pessimistic. We are making plans. We're putting strategies in place to manage the outcomes of this. I mean, there's just so much you can do about rain, but there's a lot that you can do to make sure that we keep our producers on the farms. These people are generating food for South Africans, and I think we have been spoiled in the past. You know, we've got the most affordable food and drink in the world, or some of it. And we need to make sure that we keep these people in place. If rural households or poor people start paying 30-40% more for food, then we might have a serious problem. So it is very important to conserve what we have and to make sure that with government and various stakeholders, we work together to mitigate this situation.
And then if we may just digress for a moment or two, there's that small matter of AGOA. What do you make of the negotiations there?
Well, we'll see what President Obama comes up with today. They are negotiating most of the protocols they have put in bed, except the salmonella and maybe some small other ones. But generally there's a sense of optimism. It'll all depend on missing the deadline, what the Americans will do now. So there's a couple of scenarios. The one is that they will say, listen, let's negotiate this thing out and tie up the remaining issues. The other one is that the Americans will say they will impose tariffs on the goods that we export to America, which would not be a good scenario for South Africa, as we export more than 2 billion rands worth of produce to America. So we'll have to see what happens today. Either way, we will continue communicating with these people, and we will continue trying to solve whatever the impasse is that they have.
It is a bit of a catch-22, is it not? Because those who are in the export business when it comes to agriculture are in desperate need of those duty-free benefits. But for example, those who are farming chicken in the country do not want an influx of products from the US flooding the market here. So if you were an advisor to the powers that be, as it were, what sort of decisions would you be making?
Well, I would definitely look at it holistically. Currently South Africa is going through a drought and we'll have to import maize. That's going to have a direct impact on the price of, for example, chicken. So we would have to look at the impact of this. Obviously the Americans would also have to come to the table with regards to, what's in the best interests of our economy. They're a massive economy. We're a very small player in the global sphere. And to that extent, we would have to sit together and say, what's the most beneficial situation for both countries? And, I think especially we are juxtaposed here in Southern Africa as an exporter to most Southern African countries. And where we are affected, 5, 6, 7 other countries will be affected. So it's not just South Africa, it's more a Southern African issue as well.
Omri, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much for availing yourself. Omri van Zyl, CEO of AgriSA. We are going to have to leave it there, at least for now, but very, very important things that he's discussed there. I don't know. Write to us and let us know what you think. At Morning Live SABC is where you can find our Twitter handle. In my understanding, perhaps it is limited, but I believed that AGOA was supposed to be a symbiotic relationship between developing countries and, of course, the US, but in favor of those who are the underdogs, I suppose, like South Africa at this stage. So let us know what you think of those negotiations. And also, very important, the main reason for that interview that we just had with Omri was about the drought in South Africa. Are you affected? If so, how? For example, in the Reimsig area where I stay yesterday, we had no water. At first, there was very little water pressure, and then it disappeared entirely. And the neighbors were in panic. We didn't know, was it water shedding? Are we going to experience the same as load shedding when it comes to water? So it is something that we are talking about. It is quite topical, especially when you take a look at industries and big companies like the mines and how they get water for almost nothing, and we households have to pay so much. So there's a lot to discuss when it comes to that. Do write us and let us know what you think, and I'll be sure to read those comments for you a little bit later.